after quite a lot of thunder and lightning last night. There's been rain today, most of the day. So as you can see, it's quite dark. It's still only about 5:45, something like that. Well, I've remembered to put the light on today. And just really finishing off from what I was talking about previously, which was essentially just attachment to what we like. And also, you can say attachment to aversion to what we don't like. So our tendency towards aversion to the things we don't like. So we have desire for things we want and desire for things we don't want. And we find things we like and things we want, and we then want more, because our desire is such that when we try and satisfy a desire, sometimes perhaps without realizing that it is insatiable. You cannot satisfy it. Because when you get something, you want more. Or you get so much of it that you no longer want it, and it turns into aversion with some things. So ice cream, for instance. If you ate buckets and buckets of ice cream, you'd be quite sick of it. That's not to say you wouldn't want it again. But generally speaking, for instance with even immaterial things, success, through beginning at an early age with education, we're taught to achieve, to pass exams, get results. In our sporting activities, maybe in school, we're taught to achieve, succeed, get results. You get prizes, and it's considered that you are top of the class in this or that activity. So at a very early age, we've developed this competitiveness. And there's some unusual noises. I think it's just the rain, the leaves get heavy and they fall. And, you know, this is very much demonstrating and showing this underlying problem we have with the perception of success and perception of failure. Because it is that perception that is what is fueling our craving. And it is that sensual desire that is one of the biggest ties, chains, bindings, or fetters to this life and rebirth. But not only this life and rebirth, or resulting in rebirth, I should say, but to things in this life and other people in this life, friends, family, and those we love. And then the next, and equally as important for consideration, but problematical and powerful tie to samsara and the cause of rebirth, is aversion. So the opposite of wanting more of, it's wanting less of, and wanting to get away from that we don't like. This is what we call ill will or hatred. So this desire and wanting more and more is greed. This aversion of wanting to get away and have less of something, or not liking someone, is hatred. And the third of the three root defilements is delusion, which is confusion about not understanding where these desires are coming from. And these desires are coming from something we call in the Pali language avijja, which is usually translated as ignorance. So just not understanding. Now, we're not all walking around ignorant, silly people, no. We, as a result of causes and conditions, also as a result of the way we are taught, educated and brought up in society, have been trained towards liking and disliking. But not only that, it goes back to our very human nature and desire for survival. This is how, if you take Darwin's theory, or this kind of idea of evolution, this is how survival of the fittest manifests itself. And a seemingly top of the food chain, top of the pile species, this is its species of being, the human being, has become what it has become through this constant striving. But to what end? When you look at the birds in the trees, who can just fly away to another place without a worry in the world. Or the squirrel, who's already begun a lot of those tendencies, gathering his nuts and storing them away. But a very simple life of contentment. Now, of course, they have predators. They have other worries. But what is that? Their main worries are death, primarily, as are our main worries. Aging, sickness and death. But are they? Do we think of that? No, we worry more about achieving what we feel we have to achieve before we age and get sick and die. We continue in education, we continue in our careers, trying to succeed, trying to achieve, gaining. And when we lose something, we become miserable, we become sad, we become depressed. Whether it's materialistically, the loss of a job or the loss of some money, or the loss of a loved one, the loss of a person. As if these things are not normal, as if these things are not natural. Of course there is grief. This is again built into human nature. Part of survival of a species is to protect its very existence. And part of the process of protecting its very existence is to protect its families, its close ones around it. Which is why we have this biologically inbuilt grief mechanism. And fear of our loved ones being harmed, fear of aging, sickness and death for those close to us, and the desire to want to protect those around us, even to the extent of protecting our countries, laying down our lives for our countries in some extreme circumstances, which is not uncommon and is going on to this day, with many people at war. But then when someone dies suddenly, or loses their job even, it's, oh no, we're so surprised, it's such a shock. Why? This is life. We get old, we get sick, we die. We're praised for things for a while, then we're blamed for things for a while. We have success, we have failure, gain and loss. This is life. Now, what Buddhism teaches us, what the Buddha's teachings show us in a very simple way, is just that. There is suffering in all of those aforementioned things. And the Four Noble Truths goes on to say, there is suffering, a cause of suffering, an end of suffering, and a path leading to the end of suffering. Now, I've spoken about that and the path of Sila, Samadhi, Panya, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation many times in these videos. And I'll continue to do so, because that is the basic understanding, or that is the basic principles of the Buddha's teachings. But really he just taught one thing: there's suffering and an end of suffering. But the end of suffering comes as a result of practicing that path, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, and, as I've just said, understanding those 8 parts of the Noble Eightfold Path. So with moral virtue, meditation, and the development of wisdom, you are working towards becoming free from suffering. But the second point of this Noble Eightfold Path is that there's a cause of suffering. And in Buddhism, it's not put down to a god or a devil. It's not put down to luck or fortune, superstition or beliefs. It's simply explained as being the result of karma. Either good luck or bad luck is the result of karma. And karma just means action. All of our actions of body, speech and mind. Now, that doesn't mean to say that if you are super duper well behaved, practicing all of the points on the Noble Eightfold Path, keeping all of the precepts, meditating and developing wisdom, you won't still be subject to sadness, grief, loss, as well as gain and success. Of course you will. This is life. But what the aforementioned teaches us, this practice, is how we experience it, how we see it. So rather than shocked, we're not unmoved, we're not uncaring. but we are equanimous, we are understanding, and to some extent less reactionary. We don't have expectations other than those of what is the truth. We don't push things under the mat, under the carpet, hide things away, thinking we will live forever. Because it is that attitude of denying the nature of existence, which is that all things are impermanent, the Pali word anicca. All things are unsatisfactory, the Pali word suffering, often translated, the Pali word dukkha, often translated as suffering. And that all things are out of our control, uncontrollable, the Pali word anatta, often translated as not self. By denying those very fundamental attributes of all conditioned things, including human beings, we are fueling, we are reinforcing that ignorance, the third of those three root causes of greed, hatred and delusion, three root causes of suffering, and ultimately rebirth or attachment into samsara, for all of these things to be repeated again. But through this practice and an understanding of anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and things being out of our control, through this understanding that there is suffering, we develop these qualities, these additional qualities in our lives. Which doesn't mean we have to change and suddenly become numb, zombie-like, robotic people with no emotions. No, not at all. In fact, we can have more, but better quality emotions. We can have deeper feeling through the four Brahma Viharas of metta, loving kindness, karuna, compassion, mudita, joy for others, and upekkha, equanimity. Now, upekkha, equanimity, is one of the most important attributes we can develop, along with the other three Brahma Viharas, metta, karuna, and mudita, because it is that keeps our minds calm and enables us to develop peace and tranquility, resulting in happiness. Happiness from contentment. Now, everything I've said in this video so far has been damn right miserable, hasn't it? Death, suffering, loss. Even the poor squirrel with his nuts has predators. It's a hard world out there. I heard a comment or saw a comment or something somewhere from someone quite anti-religious, I think. And there's nothing wrong with that, depending on how you understand the word religion. Buddhism isn't always considered a religion. It's considered a philosophy, a way of life. I don't consider it a philosophy even. It is simply a step-by-step guide to existence. Like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if you remember that, which never really manifested itself. But if it did, it could be very well be the teachings of the Buddha. Not all 84,000 suttas, because believe it or not, the Buddha taught 84,000 suttas about just this one thing, suffering, in so many different ways, to so many different people. And in all of the talks you hear online, Dharma talks, or even these talks on this channel, it's all about the same thing, repeated over and over again. Every question that's asked can be answered the same way, but made to sound different. Whatever your problem, whatever disaster comes along, it's the same answer. It's either, if the question is, why has this happened to me? The answer is anicca, dukkha, anatta. Because everything's impermanent, unsatisfactory, and out of your control. And then when your question is, what shall I do about it? What can I do about it to make it better? And then that's easy. It's the same answer also. Whatever the problem, it's sila, samadhi, panya. You practice, keep sila, the moral precepts. You practice meditation, and you develop wisdom to retune your mind from the human instinctual nature, animalistic way of simply wanting to survive and further the existence of the species. So basically, we're animals wanting to eat and procreate. This is what we are, and survive. And our natural human biology is such that there is immense pleasure given back in eating, procreating, and surviving as a reward. But when we see through anicca, dukkha, and anatta that very temporary nature of that reward as being a trick to fuel greed, hatred, and delusion, we get and understand through wisdom, panya, the third of sila, samadhi, panya, we understand how we are being tricked and tricking ourselves from a misconceived point of perception. We perceive all things as either threatening or conducive to our existence, including ourselves, when it is really ourselves tricking us into continual behavior of going out looking for contentment, when actually all along that contentment is within. We sit and relax. But we can't just do that, can we? So what we do is we sit and just settle, and allowing the body to settle for some time, it will relax. And similarly, without trying to stop thinking, but just watching thinking, you allow the mind to settle, the thinking mind to settle. And by doing that, it will become calm. And this is the practice of, it's just referred to as samadhi, but this is really the practice of meditation in general, including mindfulness. Because we're not always developing deep states of absorption. In fact, we're not many of us able to even do that. Certainly until we have developed the ability and the qualities in our lives to let the mind settle, at least first, to become calm, and the bodies to settle, to become relaxed, and allow us that opportunity to focus the mind on, say, a single meditation object, something calming and cooling, and also satisfying, like the breath. And really slowly bring our awareness inside, shutting down our sense doors of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching through contact, tactile feelings, and allowing the thinking process also to become not controlled, free, but without adding fuel to the thought process. So as a thought arises, as you notice it going from one thought to another in this linking chain as it does, you'll notice a gap where you remember, I'm supposed to not be thinking really and just watching the breathing. And you allow those thoughts, which are only thoughts of the past, which are inaccurate memories, that's all, that have gone. You can't go back to the past, it's happened, it's over. This isn't some elaborate tantric mudra that I'm doing here, or kung fu. It's gently waving away mosquitoes. There's a lot of them after the rain. It's rather nice when it's raining, it's cool and insect free, relatively. When it stops, it suddenly gets very hot, humid, and all of the bugs come out to play again. So what was I saying? We settle into this practice of meditation as regularly as we can. And without study, without research, without asking many questions, without having to read many books. By going inside, we learn that there is some joy and happiness there. There is even good physical feelings, feelings of rapture, through the simplicity of doing nothing, just bringing awareness into consciousness. Rather than being conscious of what you're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching, be conscious of your awareness of the breath, one simple activity, one simple object of meditation. And it doesn't take very long, with some practice, to very quickly bring yourself into a very joyous place. A place moving very definitely towards contentment. And as this practice of yours develops, you will find contentment in just that. It requires the foundations of sila, and I cannot overemphasize the importance of this. For all of you who think, well, they're just rules, no. It's a third of this entire practice. So you cannot do it without that third. You mustn't kill, steal, intentionally. You mustn't kill, steal, sexual misconduct, lie, or take intoxicants. Because if you do, you will not be able to develop any kind of joy and rapture in meditation, because the hindrances preventing your meditation will be far more prominent, will be there. Now, the 5 hindrances in meditation are what stop us developing those states, those joyous states. They're what stop us being able to even keep our mind on a meditation object for any length of time, let alone develop samadhi. And the 5 hindrances are very similar to what I've been talking about. They're sensual desire, ill will, tiredness, restlessness and worry, and doubt. And sensual desire is, like we've discussed, greed. Ill will, hatred. Tiredness is, sometimes as a result of you not really being able to focus because of the other 2, or the next 2, which I'll explain, your mind to develop any joy or pleasure in meditation, and therefore you get bored, so you just feel tired. Or it could be due to lack of sleep, in which case increase your sleep and make sure you deal with it that way. But I'm not talking about the 5 hindrances specifically today. I'm just touching on the surface. Then restlessness and worry, which comes as a result of thinking about the past. Worrying about the past. And then restlessness about what you're going to do with the future. Now, in meditation, we don't need to be thinking of the future. It hasn't happened, it might not happen. But for now, it's not happening. The only point actually any time is now. You can never go into the future or back into the past. It is always now. And this is only the only moment you need to be concerned with. Bringing your awareness to this moment here and now. And with your consciousness on this awareness, you're locked in to this point in time, which is actually timeless. A moment is timeless. And as most things related to suffering involve time, for instance, pain. Pain has to have time to be pain. Even 1 second of pain is not noticeable, however severe. You stick a needle in you very quickly like that, you'll only suffer with the resulting pain, not the needle going in if it was done in a second. Like having a tattoo. I've never had a tattoo, but that needle goes very quickly. You notice the whole length of time, not each individual needle. I mean, I don't know that for sure. I'm kind of imagining that's the case. But you get my point. Hunger, any form of suffering, grief even, requires time. So in this moment, there is no suffering. And this moment can last as long as you like. It's timeless. And it does last until the next thought comes up, bringing up one of these 5 hindrances again, which are fueled with this greed, hatred and delusion, and we go around this whole circle again. Now, it is all of this that is tying us into rebirth, whether it's in this lifetime, within this lifetime, into each and every next moment. Why we're reborn from giving up one job and going into another job, giving up one relationship and going into another relationship, watching one episode on Netflix and then having to watch another one, and when that series is finished, going on to a different series entirely. watching one movie and then another, one packet of chips, then another, the tub of ice cream, and then a third. You know, it goes on and on and on. Gathering nuts, gathering nuts. We can't help it, it's part of our human nature. But what the Buddha taught us was that we can find ways and realize how to enjoy it as our simple survival technique rather than our source of pleasure. So it's okay to have relationships, as many as you like, within the bounds of sila, responsible relationships. Not sexual misconduct, which are irresponsible relationships. And I don't have to go into that, you know. And we can eat as much as we like, responsibly. Not to become fat, and not to go on crazy diets to become too thin. To eat healthily and enjoy food. Enjoying food is part of digestion. It's very difficult if something tastes very nasty to chew it, swallow it properly and digest it, because the gastric juices don't flow. This is why we eat things that look and smell and taste nice. So before we even put them in our mouth, we've started to digest. So there's nothing wrong with that, but know it as that. Don't think, oh, this tastes wonderful, 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 I've got to have more and more and more. This is why monks live as they do. The Buddha taught us a way to see all of these things. Every day we chant about that very eating process. We chant about the simple accommodation we live in. We chant about the simple medicines we require and the simple clothing to protect ourselves purely from the heat, the cold and mosquitoes, biting things. And this is a reflection to remind us as monks. But you too must reflect each and every day on how you've treated your requisites in that daytime, how you've treated your relationships, how you've treated your eating, how you've treated all of the human things you do. And this slowly builds up a database of experience with understanding in your minds, to help you know when the next time you encounter a situation, how to deal with it better than you dealt with it the last time. And it is through this learning process, this practice, you gain big results. Now it may not be giving you degrees or PhDs. You may not get a title of doctor or professor as a result of it. But you will develop contentment. And contentment is the cause, the condition for happiness. Just as discontentment is the cause, the condition for sadness. So when you lose something you love dearly, yes, you will experience grief and sadness. But when you understand that that grief and that sadness is just a symptom caused by the discontentment of you no longer having the experience of what you've lost, then you see it equanimously. Similarly, when you are enjoying something, you can enjoy it just as much. But when you realize, you know, you have this realization, this knowledge that this enjoyment you're experiencing is impermanent and isn't ultimately going to bring you contentment, then you can enjoy it. But when it's over, when you've run out of ice cream, you don't feel so much of a loss. When the holiday's over, you don't feel so much of a loss. This is how we educate ourselves in Buddhism. So you'll find monks in the world with PhDs that are doctors, and you'll find monks in the world with no education at all. Very little even. Barely literate. But we are all the same. And actually in society, we are all the same also. The only things that are different in society are titles and material things. So Dr. so-and-so and Lord so-and-so with this big house, or the geezer down the pub, the chap, the bloke, who has a very simple job and doesn't have any of these titles or materialistic things. But it doesn't mean that one is happier and one is not happy. You could never tell. The Lord or the professor or the doctor could be very depressed, and the geezer in the pub with a very simple job could be very happy, or the other way round. And there's many examples in society of exactly that. So it is unimportant. It's useful for us to do our very best in society, not only to help ourselves but to help others, and to educate ourselves. Education is also very important because it helps flex and stretch that muscle of the brain, help keep it in condition, and help it easier, help it learn other ideas, be open and receptive to education. But it isn't necessary to understand the very simple teachings of the Buddha and the very simple practice of Buddhism. And it is this simple practice of Buddhism that erodes greed, erodes hatred, and has the opposite effect to delusion of educating the mind to the fundamental faculties of existence, of impermanence, unsatisfactory, and things being out of your control. It educates you into a practice, a way of life, of moral virtue, meditation. So developing the mind not intellectually, but with its capacity of understanding, focus. Its ability to bring your consciousness from external things of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching to just awareness alone. And this conscious awareness in space, in spaciousness, not emptiness, in spaciousness, infinite spaciousness, is separate from the four elements of earth, water, wind and fire, but in the body, the solid parts of the body, the liquid parts, the windy parts, and the heat of the body. Your conscious awareness is separate from that. So this animal part of the body, this basic surviving human species, top of the pile, has nothing to do with that which knows, your citta, this awareness in space, in spaciousness. It is at the moment strongly tied and linked by these fetters. Fetters of personality, thinking you are this personality, as opposed to just a result of causes and conditions. The ties and fetters of liking, so sensual desire, wanting more and more, or greed, as in greed, hatred and delusion. And that hatred, the fetter the tie of ill will. There's also the ties of ignorance, not understanding the Four Noble Truths, or knowing the Four Noble Truths in their intellectual sense. Of course, yes, there's suffering, and there's a cause of suffering, and an end of suffering, and a path leading to the end of suffering. It doesn't matter how many times you say that, you have to feel it, know it. So this cheetah has to take on board this knowing, this confidence as a truth. It's called the Four Noble Truths. And a truth has no doubt. There is no doubt about truth. We can only doubt that isn't proven a fact. So when there is no doubt about the Four Noble Truths, you've reduced ill will and sensual desire, and you have got rid of this notion that you are this bag of bones and liquids, as opposed to conscious awareness, and not seeing that this personality, this ego of yours, is just merely as a result of causes and conditions this bag of skin and bones has been put through. When you have realized this, you've satisfied the breaking free of, the cutting loose of those three first fetters, ties, that keep us in this state of delusion. And on those realizations of just those three first fetters, you attain to the first level of enlightenment they called Sotapanna, which at least gives you the confidence, the knowledge to know that if you're reborn, you will be experiencing rebirth unless you attain to the higher levels and eventually become an arahant of Satanagami, Anagami and Arahant. You will be reborn at least as a human being in the human realm. And this is where, in this human realm, we have the greatest opportunity to develop those other three levels of enlightenment, to Arahant eventually, therefore breaking all of those fetters and ties to greed, being free from greed, hatred and delusion, and being able to attain to Nibbana. I hope you can hear all these sounds of nature. If you're born into that realm with the squirrel and his nuts, or the little bird, or these frogs, you have less of an opportunity, and will be reborn and reborn many, many times before this opportunity of human rebirth comes along again. Not only that, the opportunity of human life within the Buddha Sasana, the time of the Buddha. Now, we're not born in the time when the Buddha was alive, and if we had have been, we would have had to have been born in northeast India, or at least somewhere close to have experienced the teachings. But what we must appreciate is we've been born in a time of this technological age and a Sangha which has continued for 2,566 years since the time of the Buddha and expanded worldwide all over the place. And we're living in this wonderful time where we have constant exposure to the Buddha's teachings if we choose to have, and access to teachers, to monastics, the opportunity to see and stay with monastics in monasteries. We have all of these overwhelmingly abundant accesses to the teachings of the Buddha. So what a wonderful opportunity it is to put those into practice. And even if you don't attain to enlightenment in this lifetime, really improve the life you are having. And when the sad times come along, really understand how to deal with them. When you lose someone dear to you through death, it's normal. It will happen again in your lifetime. And it's probably happened before, however close they are to you. You cannot go and knock on the door of any household and go into that house with a family and find that they are free from the experience of loss of a loved one. Everyone experiences this. It happens. We get old, we get sick, we die. We lose jobs. We also get jobs, and people are born, and they celebrate this. It's not really something for celebration. It's rebirth. But it's rebirth into this human realm, this wonderful time, this great opportunity to learn, understand, and benefit from this way of life. It doesn't have to be seen even as a religion. There's no praying and there's no worshipping. If you want to pray and you want to worship, there's that option also. But it isn't part of the core teachings of the Buddha. The blessings the Buddha left us were his very example, lived example of achieving to enlightenment and becoming free from rebirth. His teachings, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the monks and nuns that are here 2,566 years later, all exactly the same as they were then, in the same clothes even. And they're available to you to show you also by their example of the way they live how things can be so much better than you may perceive them to be now, with only the slightest of adjustments in your life, your way of life. You don't have to become a monk or a nun, you just have to slightly adjust your perception of what you see, how you experience things. Anyway, I think I've spoken enough. I hope there's something there that's useful, and if there is, please use it and please share it with others. I want to say something about adverts, but I don't want to say something about adverts. But rest assured, I've been doing something about that, so hopefully you've noticed. Shh. Okay. Thank you for watching.